Shalom Aleichem. We will discuss Parashat Mishpatim of this coming Shabbat. We have in fact 3 occasions upon which we can talk. Number 1, this is the 6th week of the Shovavim, in which we are compelled to enhance the quality of our life, to enhance our midot, our traits of character. And this way, maybe we can achieve a great success throughout the whole year. We are about to begin with the month of Adar. The month of Adar, as known, our sages said, it is a very happy month for the Jewish people. We all know, of course, why. The great miracle of Mordechai and Esther, who practically brought a tremendous salvation for the Jewish people, is quite known. That's why we read the Megillah in Purim. So our sages said, when the month of Adar enters, Mishenichnas Adar marbim besimcha. We increase our joy. We increase the amount of our joy. And finally we are going to read Parashat Mishpatim. So we have to find the common denominator about those 3 matters. As far as the Shovavim, we already said, it is the last week in which we have the opportunity to amend and to repent and to better our ways, especially when it comes to overcome our evil inclination, to learn how to curb our desires, our habits, to curb them. That's in fact one of the most important functions having to do with the 6 weeks of Shovavim, beginning with the week in which we read Parashat Shemot, going through Parashat Va'era, 2nd week, then the 3rd week, the Parasha of Bo, then the 4th week, the Parasha of Beshalach, and then the 5th week, last week, was Yitro, in which we read the 10 commandments received at the mountain of Sinai, and finally we reach the Parasha of this coming Shabbat, Parashat Mishpatim. We must find that there is a connection between how to increase our mitzvot, ourselves, how to increase the joy in our life throughout Parashat Mishpatim. Why not? Every word in the Torah is enough to increase our happiness in life if you learn Torah. There's no question about it that one of the changes that one should bring upon his life, if he did not learn Torah until today, you should learn Torah, even if it is just a little bit, 1 hour a day. When you are not used to it, even 1 hour becomes very difficult. But if you become used to it, you will be so much attracted to the world of Torah, to the study of Torah, that 1 hour will not be sufficient to give you the proper happiness. Nevertheless, this is the last week of the Shovavim, in which we have to make changes. And definitely one of the changes is to start learning, to become interested in that study, which is extraordinary, which has no equal in any kind of study in the world. Any kind of study, any kind of philosophy, you could study it and that's it. There's nothing more than that. Nevertheless, when you study the Torah, no matter how much you study, every word, every verse in the Torah contains so many mysteries, so many secrets. And of course, it's not up to us to know all the secrets of God. Nevertheless, you could find jewels upon jewels in each one of those verses. Let me give you an example. Parashat Mishpatim. It has 23 positive commandments. And it's only one parasha, right? 23 commandments, positive commandments, and 30 negative commandments. That means 53 commandments in one single Torah. That makes this parasha extremely important. Of course, the whole Torah, we have 54 parashiyot in the Torah, which give us 613 commandments. One parasha to give us 53 commandments is something extraordinary. What are the commandments that we read about in Parashat Mishpatim? You will see that most of these commandments have to do between us and our fellow man. Of course, not to learn, not to steal, not to cause any, not to hurt anybody. And the list is quite long, and we cannot deal with each one of those commandments. It will take an eternity for that. So I chose to pick up just one. It says in the parasha something that is totally almost irrelevant. Makke avi ve'imo mot yumat. Anybody who beats his father or mother shall die. Is there such a thing? Did you ever hear of a son who would kill his father? Well, let's assume it is so rare that it's almost irrelevant. Even though today, unfortunately, in our generations, we have seen it all. In our generation, we could hear about such a thing once in a while. That the son gets up, takes a revolver, and he kills his father. His mother, I don't think so, but his father usually. Why? How could this happen? Because of one reason. Kas, anger. 1 minute of anger is enough to destroy your world. All right, that's one thing. And then, the verse coming after this verse is Vegonev ishum charo mot yumat. Venimtza biyado mot yumat. If one kidnaps another fellow and he is found later on, he shall also be punished with death. Apparently, it has nothing to do with the first commandment of someone who is beating his father and mother. And then comes the third verse, where it says kalel avi ve'imo mot yumat. If you curse your father or mother, also it leads to death, to execution by, our sages said in Masechet Sanhedrin, the death having to do with cursing or belittling your father or mother is death, the worst kind of death, stoning, which in accordance with the teaching of our sages, stoning is the hardest one of all the four classic executions, types of execution. The first one of the one who beats his father and to death must be killed. How? By strangulation, which according to our sages is less severe than stoning. So the question comes up on the surface. Why is it that mekalel, cursing or belittling, is worse than beating his father to death? What's going on? And the second question, what is that verse having to do with kidnapping, having to do with those two things? We shall explain. But number one, this parasha, every single commandment has to do with overcoming oneself. And be careful about not to hurt your fellow Jew and so forth, right? And having to do with the Shovavim. If we don't try to control ourselves, to learn how to control ourselves in this week, which is the 6th week of the Shovavim, in which we have tried for the past 5 weeks to amend and to repent and to better our life spiritually, then when else? One of the most important things that one should try to learn how to curb and how to control is anger. Because anger is the only motive behind which one can commit the most horrible crime, such as killing his own father or mother. But still the question remains, how come the one who curses is worse than the one who beats to death? Well, we have for this the commentaries of the great Rishonim, such as the Ramban, Rabbi Saadia Gaon, Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra. Also it's brought in the Midrash. And the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman says, it's because cursing or belittling the honor of your father and mother is more frequent than killing. Killing is practically irrelevant. Where do you see that a son could kill? Maybe among the nations. But among the Jewish people, such a thing is unbelievable. But as I said, unfortunately, this generation, we have heard everything. But when it comes to mekalel, belittling the honor of your parents and cursing them, very, very common today. It is a terrible thing to say, I admit. But it does happen. Why again? Ka'as, anger. So the Ramban says, you want to know why belittling the honor of your parents or cursing them is worse than even beating to death? Because beating to death, when is it going to happen? But cursing happens every day. Especially in a day which belongs to our generation, upon which our sages said, before the Mashiach comes, chutzpah is gay. There is going to be a time of great insolence, a great brutal insolence. People don't think enough. And one of the things to remedy for is, in this week at least, is to learn and to see how we can curb, how we can overcome and control our anger. And to use our anger because it is given by God Himself. But it is given so that anger should be used for the proper goal. For example, educating your children. Today they don't even get angry at the children. Once in a while you have to get angry at the child if he does something that is not proper. But it shouldn't be the kind of anger that comes from the heart. It should be an anger that you know what you're doing. So you raise your voice towards him as though you are angry, but you are not really angry. Because anger is not allowed unless if it is used for the proper purpose, as I have explained. Otherwise, 90% of the cases of anger are definitely not to be used. Because anger is tantamount to worshipping idols. Our sages said, once you get angry, you are similar to someone who worships an idol. What is the connection? I'll tell you. Our sages said, based on the verse that says, you should not have internally in you a foreign god. What is this? It means that when you are angry, you don't listen to not to your conscience, not to your logic, or to anyone. You listen only to what you have in your instinct. That's avodah zarah. That's idol worshipping. Why? Because you have lost it all. In 1 minute you could do it. You could destroy your life and the life of others. Just a few days ago, we read about a couple who maybe for 1 minute they had a disagreement. And the husband, equipped with a weapon, he took his revolver and he killed his young wife. A horrible situation. I'm sure he himself, the husband himself, wants to die. Why? Because now he cannot bring his wife back. Because of 1 minute, 1 second of anger, he destroyed his life and the life of his family. Now his 4 children, little children, remained without a mother. There's no question about it that it's worth to spend millions to learn how to curb one's anger. Same thing with every kind of character. But we're talking about the time of the Shovavim and going into the month of Adar, which is the month of Simcha, the month of joy. And our sages said you have to increase your joy. How do we increase joy? I mean, joy and happiness are an instinctive, right? If you have a reason, you are happy. If you don't have a reason, for what are you going to be happy? But our sages said something extraordinary in Masechet Shabbat, page 32. In Masechet Brachot, page 31. It says there, En Ashchina Shora, the divine presence dwells upon you or your house, Ela mitoch devar mitzvah, Ela mitoch simcha shel mitzvah. The divine presence rests upon you when you become happy because of one mitzvah, one commandment that you do properly. You are happy with that commandment. Let's say you learn Torah. You decide to learn Torah. Let's say from now on, every day, you dedicate half hour, 1 hour for Torah study. Well, it's guaranteed that you already brought 50% of the happiness at home. If you do every kind of other mitzvah, if you do it with conscience, with understanding, and with enthusiasm, every mitzvah is going to contribute to your happiness. This is something, I cannot prove it to you, but I can prove it to myself because I have seen it, I have felt it. Even a prayer, just a prayer, if done properly. I remember Rabbi Avigdor Miller, alav shalom, used to say, after one single arvit, one prayer of the evening, or mincha, or in the morning, one silent prayer, after you finish, but you prayed with the understanding and the meaning of each word, after you finish, you feel such an invasion of happiness in your heart. He used to say that. He used to say how, oh boy, how delicious was this arvit, this mincha, or this shakrit. How delicious. The happiness, the joy. I have no doubt about it. You become more religious by doing more mitzvot. Any mitzvah that you add to your life is going to bring you more contentment, more joy. Well, try it. As I said, Parashat Mishpatim is talking about all the commandments that have to do between one man and another, between one and his fellow man. Things that apparently have not much to do with God, right? I mean, take, for example, the 10 Commandments. The first 4 commandments have to do with God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God. Lo yeh lecha Elokim acherim al panai. Should not have any idols or anything. Then lo tisai et shem Hashem lashav. Do not use the name of God in vain. Right? And then, and commandment number 5 is kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor your father and mother. Lema'an ya'arichun yamecha. So that your life will be lengthened, will be longer. Immediately after the commandment of honoring one's parents, then we read about the 5 last commandments of the tablets, and they all deal about matters between one and another, such as do not kill, do not murder, do not steal, and so forth. Lo tignov, lo tinaf, not commit act of adulteries. But what comes in the middle? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor one's parents. Why? I'll give you one explanation, even though I know that there are many explanations. The commandment of honoring one's parents comes in the middle of the 10 commandments, which means it has to do with the first 4 before before this commandment of honoring one's parents, and it has to do, of course, with the other commandments that come after. That's exactly the point. The point is that Parashat Mishpatim has to do with stealing and not hurting the feelings of others, and to pay attention to the honor of your fellow man, to pay attention to this and that, everything that has to do between one and his fellow man. But we have read about Umkalel Avi ve'imo, one who curses his father and mother, one who beats his father and mother. So this is not a matter solely that has to do with much what's going on between people, which absolutely even the nations agree upon that. But our sages insist on the point that each one of these commandments, as much as it looks like if it has to do between one and another, it has to do, number one, with God. What is the proof? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor one's parents. It has to do with the honor of God. Because the Talmud says that God considers your parents as if they are His partners. And God says elsewhere, if you lack honor, if you don't give the proper honor to your parents, you did not give the proper honor to God Himself. And in the Masechet Kiddushin, on page 31, it says, Shlosha shutafim hem ba'adam. There are three partners in the making of men. The father provides the bones and the brain and other things. The mother provides the flesh, the blood. And finally, that part which comes from God is the soul. Of course, everything is from God. But God wanted us to understand how important that one should honor his father and mother. If one learns how to honor, he will never come to beat to death anybody. So you see, that's the reason, another reason why cursing or lacking in honor, lacking respect for your parents has been to be punished, even though it never happened before, but it was to be punished according to the Torah in a more severe way than even the one who beats his father to death. Why? Because the one who beats his father to death it cannot happen. It's beyond the imagination. Whereas lacking respect to your parents, which leads to cursing and everything, very common, especially in our generation. That's why our sages said that that's the reason why the Torah finds this crime even greater than the first one. Let us now say, if we want the month of Adar to become the chief month for happiness and joy, which will of course give its happiness upon the rest, all the months of the year, which means all the time. Number one, we have to do the best we can to control ourselves, to control our instincts, our desires, to curb anything that might harm us and our fellow men. If we learn to live in accordance with the precepts of the Torah, the commandments of the Torah, above all, to remove any kind of hatred from the heart towards another Jew. The Torah says in Vayikra, Parashat Kedoshim, Lo tisna et achiecha bilvavecha. Don't you ever hate your fellow man, who is known in the Torah as your brother. Never hate, no matter what. You can hate your enemies, but not your fellow Jew. Because the fellow Jew requires the neshama of the Jew, requires kavod, requires honoring, respecting, loving, and so forth. There is so much more to say, my friends. Unfortunately, time is limited. So let me just include myself in this blessing to you all, as the month of Adar is coming to bring more happiness for the Jewish people and the world probably. We hope and pray that you will all feel and have this kind of happiness. How? by increasing your spiritual life, by bettering your character and our character. Everyone is under the obligation to understand how important this is, especially if you are a Jew. It is incumbent upon us to remember that we received the Torah at the mountain of Sinai. It is incumbent upon us to learn how to honor God, how to honor our parents, and how to honor our friends. And then happiness is unlimited. Shabbat Shalom, my friends, and be well.